Have you ever mistaken a whirlwind romance for true connection? Has your heart ever raced so fast you thought it was love, only to find later that what felt deep was just intense? Intensity seduces. It arrives like a storm, fast, loud, unforgettable. It floods the senses. You lose sleep, appetite, perspective. You feel seen, or think you do. And in that rush, that visceral charge, it's easy to believe you found something rare. But what if intensity is not a sign of emotional depth, only of emotional urgency? For many women, especially those shaped by emotional deprivation or chaotic attachment in earlier life, this confusion is not a character flaw. It's a psychological pattern, a learned response to emotional scarcity. When a relationship finally feels alive, it seems to offer what's been missing: passion, attention, significance. But there's a difference between being ignited and being known. Let's be honest. For some, intensity feels safer than intimacy, because true intimacy requires presence, consistency, and vulnerability, not fireworks, but quiet, sustained warmth. That can feel unfamiliar, even boring, especially if what you've known is love that comes with sharp highs and punishing lows. It's not your fault. You were conditioned. Intensity mimics intimacy, and the brain doesn't always know the difference, especially when it's been starved of secure connection. You chase the thrill, the dopamine, the drama, because it's what your nervous system has learned to equate with love. There's no shame in this, only a chance to see it clearly, maybe for the first time. Imagine this: a woman, recently divorced after decades of emotional neglect, meets someone who showers her with attention, admiration, and desire. It feels like redemption, like waking up after years of silence. But within weeks, the cracks appear: inconsistent behavior, emotional withdrawal, cycles of hot and cold. She clings harder, trying to preserve that early intensity. She mistakes the pain for passion, the longing for proof of love. Enter Freud. If we trace a woman's need for emotional intensity to its origin, he might say, we often find unmet needs buried in childhood: a hunger for validation, safety, significance. The adult relationship becomes a stage for unfinished emotional business. And so intensity feels familiar, even if it hurts. This is where your awareness begins. Are you still waiting for love from someone who only gives you intermittent reinforcement? Do you call it intimacy when it's only adrenaline? Here's your invitation. Write this question in your journal. When have I felt most alive in a relationship? And was it truly love or emotional survival? This script is not about judgment, it's about truth. Because the woman you are becoming wants more than heat. She wants home. And that begins when you no longer confuse the fire for the light. There's a particular kind of relationship that doesn't start, it erupts. The chemistry is immediate, the conversation addictive, the touch electric. You think, finally someone sees me, desires me, ignites something in me I thought was gone. But what happens when that fire burns too fast and leaves no warmth behind? Many women, especially those who have gone years in emotionally sterile relationships or have spent lifetimes caring for others while being emotionally ignored, experience the arrival of passion as an emotional rescue. It feels like water to a woman who's been thirsting, not just for affection, but for aliveness. And here lies the first trap. We equate passion with connection. We assume the intensity we feel must mean something is deeply shared. But often, it's not mutual understanding. It's mutual projection. It's the brain, high on neurochemistry, mistaking a dopamine surge for emotional compatibility. Let's begin here. The dopamine rush. When someone suddenly floods us with attention, novelty, and excitement, our brain rewards that experience by releasing dopamine, the same neurochemical associated with pleasure and addiction. The more unpredictable the reward, the more addictive it becomes. This is classic intermittent reinforcement, and it's not love. It's a neurological trap. The mistake happens when we interpret this rush as the presence of something profound. But intensity isn't a measure of intimacy. It's a measure of stimulation. The more deprived you've been, the more susceptible you are to this misinterpretation, because intensity gives you a feeling of mattering, of being special. But real connection doesn't need to shock the system to be true. It feels stable, peaceful, grounded. Now add to this the effect of attachment styles. Women with anxious attachment, often shaped in childhood by unpredictable caregiving, tend to bond quickly and deeply, especially when love is inconsistent. They crave closeness, fear abandonment, and interpret volatility as evidence of emotional significance. The emotional highs mimic early relational chaos, and the heart begins to confuse pain with proof. If it hurts this much, it must be real. What's really happening is a repetition of the past, not a discovery of deep connection. But the body remembers. And when someone lights you up after a long silence, when they seem to get you instantly, when the first kiss feels like a homecoming, it's tempting to believe you've finally found your person. What you may have found is a short-lived high. A flare, not a flame. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Intensity without emotional bonding fades fast. It can't sustain itself. What you thought was chemistry might have just been emotional hunger meeting novelty. And when the passion cools, as it inevitably does, you're left with the reality. Was there mutual understanding, shared values, trust, or was it all intoxication? Let me tell you about Marta. She was 52 when she met him, divorced for 5 years. A woman who had rebuilt her life after a 20-year marriage marked by emotional vacancy. She had done the therapy, raised her children, found joy in solitude, but still, a longing remained. When she met Daniel, he was attentive, magnetic, utterly present. Their first month felt like a movie. He spoke of fate, of stars aligning. He said all the things her ex-husband never did. She believed this was it. By month 3, the text messages slowed. The intensity dipped. When she brought it up, he called her needy. When she asked for clarity, he withdrew. And suddenly she was scrambling to preserve something that had never truly been stable. Her nervous system was hooked, not by love, but by contrast. After years of numbness, the spike of feeling had felt like truth. Freud might step in here with a frown and a gentle observation. The woman mistakes the revival of desire for the birth of intimacy. But what she revives is not a new connection, only an old need dressed in a new form. The echo of unmet longing can be louder than the voice of genuine closeness. What if your craving for passion is not about love, but about proof that you can still feel? What if you've been taught that only emotional intensity makes a relationship meaningful? Then ask yourself, have I ever stayed in a relationship because it was intense, even when it was unkind, unstable, or unclear? This is not a call to abandon desire. It's a call to discriminate between desire that nourishes and desire that devours. Here's a simple but powerful task. Take a moment and write this sentence. What does safety feel like in love? Then answer it, without describing excitement, butterflies, or urgency. Describe the quiet, the steadiness, the trust. Ask your body, not your fantasy. Because a connection that burns you out is not a connection. It's a flare-up of unresolved need. And you deserve more than emotional combustion. You deserve continuity, respect, peace. Have you ever told yourself, at least we feel something, even if it hurts? In a world that often equates emotional chaos with passion, many women find themselves caught in a painful paradox, believing that the intensity of conflict, jealousy, and reconciliation is evidence of depth. That love must come with struggle, that silence means absence, and storm means meaning. But what if the drama you've normalized isn't a sign of emotional depth, but of emotional dysregulation? Many women were conditioned to believe that love requires suffering, not because they were weak, but because love in their early lives came inconsistently. Affection mixed with abandonment, warmth mixed with withdrawal. This unpredictable rhythm taught the body to associate love with uncertainty. And now, as adults, the emotional roller coaster feels familiar, even necessary. This is the second emotional trap, confusing drama with depth. Let's begin with the emotional roller coaster. For women with a history of emotional neglect, unpredictability becomes the emotional template. When someone gives you affection and then pulls away, and then comes back again, it creates a heightened state of arousal. You feel alive, consumed, seen, and each time the connection is re-established after a rupture, it feels even more intense, as if the pain somehow deepens the bond. But this is not depth. This is trauma reenactment. This is intermittent reinforcement again. And the more this pattern repeats, the harder it is to break. Because every painful rupture followed by reconnection feels like a triumph. We made it through. This must be real. In reality, what's developing is a cycle of dependency, not intimacy. You bond through survival, not shared understanding. Now consider this. Conflict becomes a substitute for vulnerability. Instead of talking openly about fears, needs, or disappointments, the relationship operates through explosions and silences. Emotional regulation is replaced by volatility, and because the highs feel so high after the lows, you start to believe that this cycle means something, that your connection is somehow deeper than others, more passionate, more real. But real depth doesn't need constant breakdowns to prove its existence. Depth is found in truth, in sustained presence, in emotional safety. When two people are emotionally mature, depth shows up as calm, not chaos. Here's where self-worth quietly enters the conversation. If you have internalized the belief that you must earn love by enduring hardship, by fixing others, by proving your resilience, then you will be drawn to relationships where struggle is the main language. You'll confuse being needed with being loved. You'll tolerate disrespect, hoping it eventually transforms into appreciation. And when things are peaceful, you may even feel bored or anxious, as if something is missing. What's missing isn't passion, it's adrenaline, and your nervous system has been trained to expect it. Let me tell you about Elise. She was 47, widowed young. For years, she put her life on hold for her children. When she started dating again, she met a man who was charismatic, unpredictable, and emotionally intense. They argued often. He disappeared during fights, came back with grand gestures. The cycle repeated. And though her friends expressed concern, Elise insisted, "But no one's ever made me feel this much before." She mistook emotional chaos for connection. She believed the pain was proof of meaning. Freud might sit beside her and say gently, "The woman who mistakes volatility for vitality is still looking for the one who left or never arrived." The drama becomes a ritual, a way to feel alive when emptiness is too much to bear. Ask yourself, have I confused chaos with connection? Do I believe that peace means emotional distance and that emotional depth must hurt? You don't have to answer right now, but your body already knows. It flinches at the fights, it tightens at the silence, it craves resolution, and still it stays. Here's your practice. Each time conflict arises in your relationships, ask, is this bringing us closer or just repeating a pattern? Write down 3 ways you could express what you feel without turning it into a test or a threat. And then ask, would I still feel connected to this person if the chaos disappeared? Because true emotional depth doesn't need fire to stay alive. It needs truth, safety, and presence. And you're allowed to outgrow the story that says love must be earned through pain. Do you think about him more than you think about yourself? Do your thoughts circle him morning, night, in the quiet spaces where your own needs used to live? Obsession is a haunting thing, seductive, persistent, and often misread as love. But let's call it what it is, a fixation, a mental entrapment that masquerades as emotional devotion. It begins innocently. You meet someone who sparks something dormant in you, a part of you that's been starved of recognition, excitement, or affection. Suddenly you feel awake. Every word he says seems meaningful, every text a lifeline. The space between interactions stretches unbearably long, and your sense of well-being becomes tethered to his responses. But love, real love, liberates. Obsession enslaves. When women confuse obsession with love, they lose sight of their own inner compass. Their days become organized around the other, not because of his actual value, but because of what he has come to symbolize. Relief from loneliness, from inadequacy, from the question that echoes in so many. Am I still lovable? Obsession is not rooted in presence. It's rooted in fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being abandoned, fear of being invisible. Let's explore the obsessive thoughts. They don't appear without a cause. Obsession is often the child of emotional deprivation. A woman who wasn't mirrored as a child, who wasn't consistently seen, valued, soothed, grows up with a restless attachment to anyone who offers those sensations. She grasps, clings, waits, and the more uncertain the connection becomes, the more valuable it feels. The mind, desperate for stability, begins to loop. Why hasn't he called? What did I say wrong? What is he doing now? These are not reflections of love. They are symptoms of anxiety. And in many cases, they are the remnants of survival strategies learned in childhood, where attention was rare and unpredictable. Next, we confront a quiet danger, the loss of self. Obsession doesn't just consume your thoughts, it erodes your identity. Women in obsessive entanglements often silence their needs, abandon their routines, and reshape their entire emotional landscape around the other person. You stop listening to your own hunger, your own fatigue, your own intuition. You don't ask, how do I feel? You ask, how does he feel about me? And in that equation, you disappear. When your sense of worth becomes dependent on another's affection, you stop existing independently. You become an extension of their moods, availability, and choices. And the more you chase them, the further you drift from yourself. At this point, Freud would not whisper. He would speak clearly, decisively. The woman who loses herself in obsession is not in love. She is in repetition, repeating the unmet needs of her early life, seeking wholeness through someone else instead of reclaiming it from within. There is no intimacy in obsession, only emotional captivity. So what's the way out? It begins with healthy boundaries, and not just with others, but with yourself. Boundaries are not barriers. They are the conditions that protect your inner life. They say, I am not only who you see, I exist even when you turn away. Here's the truth most women never hear enough. You are allowed to have a life that doesn't revolve around being wanted. That's not loneliness, that's sovereignty. Let's return briefly to a woman I'll call Andrea. She was 61 when she began seeing a man who was unpredictable but intoxicating. They weren't even in a relationship, not officially, but every interaction lingered in her body for days. Every silence hollowed her out. She said, "It feels like love. I can't stop thinking about him." But when we paused and looked deeper, she realized something. He didn't know her, not truly. He knew how to excite her, how to keep her on edge, but he never asked about her deeper life, her dreams, her grief. She wasn't in love with him. She was in love with how he made her feel temporarily, and in between those moments she disappeared from herself. So I ask you, have you ever vanished inside someone else's presence? Have you ever become so focused on being wanted that you forgot to want yourself? Here's your practice. Each time your mind fixates on someone who isn't consistently present, say this aloud: I deserve to be chosen in peace, not pursued in chaos. Then redirect your energy toward one act that brings you back into the center of your own life. A walk, a page of writing, a meal made with love, a phone call to someone who knows your whole name. This isn't about cutting people off. It's about cutting the cord that tethers your worth to anyone else's gaze, because the love that expands you will never require you to shrink. Has your skin ever confused being touched with being known? There's a moment in the dim hush after intimacy when the world feels still, and for a brief time you might believe that your bodies speak a truth words have never touched, that this closeness, this breath against your shoulder, is proof that something real is happening between you. But sex, even exquisite sex, is not a guarantee of emotional intimacy. For many women, especially those navigating life after years of neglect or absence, sexual chemistry arrives like a divine sign. It stirs what has been dormant. It validates that she is still desirable, still vibrant, still here. And in the electricity of the moment, it's easy to believe that physical intensity must be evidence of something deeper. But this is the fourth emotional trap, believing that sexual chemistry means emotional connection. Let's begin with the distinction: physical intimacy versus emotional intimacy. Physical intimacy lives in the body. It's touch, hunger, movement, rhythm. It can be profound. It can be healing. But without emotional presence, it is not intimacy. It is stimulation. Emotional intimacy, on the other hand, lives in the willingness to be seen. It asks for vulnerability, presence, and truth. And sometimes a man may offer his body while guarding his soul. He may undress with you, but never reveal himself. That contrast can leave a woman confused. If he wants me this much, why do I still feel alone when he leaves? Because chemistry is not connection, and lust can be both honest and empty. Here's the paradox. The more temporary fulfillment you receive through physical closeness, the more starved you may become emotionally. You touch and are touched, but no deeper bond forms. You share your body, but not your fears, not your longings, not your real self. And yet the body remembers the intensity and interprets it as significance. The truth? Many women, especially those raised to equate desirability with worth, absorb the false message that if he wants my body, he values me. But physical desire is not love, and attraction, though powerful, is not commitment. Freud might observe here with clinical precision, the woman confuses the arousal of the senses with the opening of the soul. But the flesh can deceive, especially when it offers a temporary relief from emotional isolation. She believes she is being known, but she is only being touched. This is not a rejection of sex. It is a reclaiming of your power within it. Because true sexual connection, the kind that does create emotional intimacy, is built on trust, curiosity, and mutual regard. It is not only about pleasure, it is about presence, about what is said before and after, about whether he sees you when the clothes are back on. Let me share a moment from Dana's life. At 55, newly single after 2 decades of what she called invisible marriage, Dana began exploring her sensuality for the first time in years. She met a man who made her feel radiant, desired, awakened. Their nights together were cinematic, but after 3 months, she realized, she didn't know his values. He never asked about her work, her fears, her joys. She mistook physical closeness for relational growth. She said, "I thought we were becoming more connected, but it was just more naked." She laughed when she said it, but there was sadness in her voice, because the ache of being physically held but emotionally alone is a quiet kind of grief. So what does building emotional bonds look like? It looks like emotional consistency, like being asked how your heart is, not just how your body feels. It looks like staying after the high, tending to the low, being present when the seduction ends. Emotional intimacy requires time, curiosity, willingness to engage beyond the erotic. And yes, that might feel vulnerable, even slow. But it is in the slowness that depth takes root. Ask yourself now, have I ever used sex as a way to secure closeness? Have I ever stayed in a dynamic because the chemistry felt too strong to walk away from, even when I knew, deep down, that I wasn't being met emotionally? This reflection isn't about shame, it's about clarity. You are allowed to want passion, but not at the expense of your emotional self. Here's a small practice. Before your next romantic or sexual connection, write down these 2 questions. Do I feel emotionally safe with this person? Can I speak my truth here, even if it's inconvenient? If the answer is no, then the chemistry, no matter how electric, is not enough, because the kind of closeness your heart craves cannot be manufactured in bed. It must be cultivated in conversation, in presence, in mutual vulnerability. And the woman you are becoming doesn't trade her peace for momentary heat. She waits for the kind of love that warms without burning. Have you ever waited for someone to come and fix what life, or love, once broke in you? In the quiet spaces between heartbreak and healing, there's a longing that many women carry, not just to be loved, but to be saved, to be pulled from loneliness, lifted from the fatigue of doing it all alone, and finally held by someone who says, "You don't have to carry this anymore." And that longing is human, tender, understandable. But it's also the 5th emotional trap, seeking rescue instead of true partnership. Let's begin with the savior complex. For women who have spent decades managing the weight of unmet emotional needs, often without support, it's tempting to hope that love will arrive like salvation, that someone will enter and do what no one else ever has. Stay, heal, fix, complete. It's not weakness that leads to this hope. It's exhaustion. After years of caretaking, surviving, proving, many women simply want to rest. And so, when a man appears who offers comfort, guidance, or even control, it can feel like grace. But rescue is not intimacy, and being saved is not the same as being seen. When we seek to be rescued, we unconsciously accept a position of less than. We allow the other to become the strong one, the one with the answers, the one with the power. And while this might feel soothing at first, over time it breeds dependence, not connection. Because to be rescued is to be relieved of your agency, to surrender your emotional authority to someone else's hands. Many women don't realize they're doing this. It's subtle. It sounds like, "He completes me. I'd be lost without him. I just need someone to take care of me." But partnership, real conscious partnership, requires empowerment over dependence. It is built not on one person carrying the other, but on both standing side by side, whole in their individuality, open in their connection. Dependency disguised as love leads to subtle control dynamics. The one who rescues often begins to expect gratitude, loyalty, even compliance. And the one who is rescued may begin to feel invisible in her own story. She's not a woman, she's a role, a need to be filled. Freud might say here with a sharp but caring tone, when the woman seeks to be saved, she recreates the child she once was, helpless before the absent or overwhelming parent. She does not fall in love with the man, but with the promise of not having to do it all alone. This is a mirror many women avoid, because behind it lies grief. The grief of all the times no one came. The grief of holding your own hand when others walked away. The grief of doing the hard things, silently, daily, and never being chosen in return. But here is where liberation begins, not by waiting for rescue, but by choosing mutual growth. In a true partnership, both people evolve. Both people are accountable. Both people see and are seen. No one is the hero, no one is the project. You don't need someone to complete you. You need someone who respects the fact that you've completed yourself. Let me bring you to a moment in Clara's life. Clara was 60 when she met Thomas. She had spent most of her life in survival mode, raising kids alone, working 2 jobs, building a quiet resilience. When Thomas arrived, successful and confident, she felt like she could finally rest. He took care of everything. At first, she was grateful. Then the small things changed. He made decisions without her, dismissed her opinions, said things like, "You don't need to worry about that anymore." What looked like love was control. Clara realized she had handed over the pen of her life story. Again. So I ask you, have you ever mistaken comfort for care or control for protection? Have you ever silenced your voice to keep the support you thought you couldn't live without? Here's a question worth writing in your journal. Am I looking for someone to walk with me or to carry me? You're allowed to want rest, support, love, but not at the cost of your autonomy. Our symbolic practice for today. Write a vow, not to a partner but to yourself. A vow that says, I will not abandon myself to be chosen. I will not shrink to be loved. I will not confuse being helped with being held. Because the love that honors you will never ask you to disappear inside it. You are not a damsel. You are not a burden. You are a woman, sovereign, wise, shaped by fire and still standing. And true partnership will meet you there, not above you, not beneath you, but beside you. What if everything you believed was love, was just emotional choreography rehearsed in the shadows of your unmet needs? What if the whirlwind was a warning, the drama a distraction, the obsession a cry for closeness that never came? It's time to look clearly and tenderly at the emotional traps that have shaped your story, not with shame, but with curiosity. Because these patterns are not a flaw in you. They are the echoes of early survival, the language your nervous system learned to speak when it didn't yet have words for what it needed. Let's take a breath and remember what you've uncovered. You've seen how passion can masquerade as connection, when in truth it's just a high, a biochemical burst mistaken for depth. You've uncovered the way drama can mimic intimacy, how the storm becomes a ritual, and emotional chaos is used to substitute what calm presence should have provided. You've witnessed how obsession consumes the self, how fixation feeds the illusion of love while draining you of your center, your clarity, your peace. You've recognized the trap of sexual chemistry cloaking emotional absence, how touch can soothe the body while starving the soul, and how momentary closeness is not the same as relational truth. And finally, you've faced the quiet ache behind the fantasy of being rescued, only to realize that love is not meant to carry you, but to walk beside you. Freud might offer, in one final reflection, the patterns we repeat are not random. They are the unconscious seeking resolution. And what we call fate is often just memory, playing itself out through different faces, hoping to be seen finally for what it really is. This is your call to consciousness, not to harden, not to close your heart, but to re-educate it, to teach it the difference between intensity and intimacy, between being chosen and being used, between surviving love and being nourished by it. Ask yourself softly and without defense, what kind of intimacy have I accepted in the past? And what kind of intimacy am I finally ready to receive? Let the answers be slow. Let them unfold over time, because the intimacy you're seeking cannot be rushed. It is not loud. It is not desperate. It is quiet, steady, mutual, and most of all, safe. Here's a final practice to anchor this awareness. Sit with yourself. Write the sentence, "I no longer mistake intensity for intimacy." Repeat it aloud. Let it settle into your nervous system. Then write what intimacy feels like, not what it looks like, not what it performs like, but what it feels like to your body, to your soul, to the part of you that no longer wants to settle. Because the woman you're becoming doesn't chase. She chooses. She doesn't beg for attention. She embodies presence, and she doesn't call a fire a home. She waits for the warmth that lasts. Now I ask you, have you ever confused intensity with intimacy? Which of these traps have you known, and which are you ready to leave behind? Share your reflections in the comments below. Let this be a space of clarity, of truth, and of quiet revolution. And if you're ready to keep unraveling these emotional patterns with compassion and insight, subscribe and stay with me. This journey is not about quick fixes, it's about deep freedom. Emotional freedom begins where guilt ends. And you, my dear, are already walking in that direction.